Exterior, Tent City, dawn. Wisps of cookfire smoke stain the air. Blue dawn glows on the horizon, backlighting rows and rows of military tents. A French flag snaps in the breeze. Interior, Ottillie's tent, dawn. 2 pistols on a footlocker. Beside them, the golden icon, the statue of the saint. A gloved hand scoops it up. Ottilie, decked out in her full uniform, bandoliers crisscrossing her battered blue trench coat, tucks the icon under a lapel, patting it to make sure it's secure. Exterior, Ottillie's tent, dawn. Baptiste sits on an upturned crate, wolfing down eggs off of a tin set on the barrel that serves as a table. Felice sets another plate on the barrel for Claude, who lounges on a stool beside the hulking infantryman. The scout spears a steaming sausage from the plate with his boot knife. Claude. Thank you, Felice. Nothing better than a hot meal before hunting the horrors, aye? Baptiste grunts. A shadow falls on him, and a shot bag thumps on the barrel. Brielle, off-screen. Here you go. Baptiste glances up with another grunt. Brielle stares down at him. Brielle. Figure you need all the help you can get. She grins. Baptiste shoves the shot bag away. Nah, you take it. Brielle. No. Baptiste puts his fork down. Aye. You're going in with her. You take it. I am going in with her. Right to the heart of it. And I'm going to cut that fiend's head clean from its shoulders. But between the commander and the investigator and the mouthy scout here, there's plenty of silver surrounding me. Best to have some on the flank, just in case. Now take the shot and give me your letter. Baptiste glowers at her for a beat. With a third grunt, he produces a folded scrap of parchment and presses it into the grenadier's waiting hand. Brielle looks at Claude. Claude. You know I don't leave anything behind. Brielle. And what a lucky find you'll be for someone one day, aye? She ducks into the tent. Claude smiles. Interior, Ottillie's tent, dawn. Brielle enters. Ottilie, standing beside her cot, shoves a pistol into each of her holsters. Brielle. Madam? Ottilie reaches over to a simple wood box on the cot and flips up the lid. Brielle places a handful of small folded parchments into the box. Brielle. Claude declines to leave anything again. Ottilie. We all have our ways. Brielle. He won't shut up for 2 minutes, but can't write a farewell. Ottilie closes the box, revealing the legend scrawled on the lid. Deliver upon death, or missing in action. Montage. Felice's silver knife slides home in its sheath. A musket is loaded, warhammer strapped to a back, a holy symbol on a necklace secured across the leather breastplate. Crate lid tossed aside, revealing bowls of salt. Salt scooped and poured into leather pouches. Flasks of oil dropped into gloved hands. Torches gathered from a half barrel. Cuffs shot over leather braces. Leather shoulder straps tightened. Boots stamped in the dirt. Boot knife slid into a boot cuff. Heavy brass syringe stuffed into a satchel. Plague mask snatched off a board. Exterior, Tent City, dawn. Hold on the brightening sky. A relic atop a staff rises into frame, backlit by the rising sun. Pull back, low angle. Reveal Jolanda leading the warband out of the camp. A hero shot. The Nightmare Hunters march. Greetings, good humans, and welcome to Tabletop Alchemy, where sometimes we play our custom skirmish scenario and continue the story of our Silver Bayonet saga. And we thank our patrons for their continued patronage and support of the whimsical arts we explore here. So, you're here for the battle report, or dare I say, the story. One can hope. So, just a brief setup before we get into it. If you're a new viewer here, essentially, Les Chasseurs de Cauchemars, the French Nightmare Hunters, went through the second solo scenario in the Silver Bayonet rulebook, and succeeded in escaping the vampire in the chapel ruins they had been tasked with exploring. But upon their return to the army's base camp, the warband's occultist, Jolanda Scaletta, convinced the warband's commanding officer, Ottilie Bastarache, that they couldn't just leave a vampire running wild in the woods. So, they have decided to return to the ruined chapel and exorcise the grounds of undead. They will do this by sowing unhallowed ground with consecrated salts, and Jolanda will conduct a ritual prayer involving holy oil and a small icon of religious power that they found in the last scenario. And we also wrote up a couple of house rules for a stealth mechanic and fixing the monster expert attributes so it can work in solo play. You can download these PDFs at tabletopalchemy.com if you want, and I've also put a link in the description below to my Les Chasseurs de Cauchemars Spotify playlist, in case you want to hear some cinematic score ideas to go along with the story. So I'm setting up the table to recreate the exact layout that I had in Scenario 2, so all the trees and rocks and the cemetery and all that stuff's in the same spot. Now we have to put down our clue markers, but they're not clue markers today. These represent unhallowed ground markers. And now we put a revenant next to each one of these unhallowed ground markers. And just to remind everybody, starting from the second turn on, a new revenant will appear or spawn in the unhallowed ground if there are any unhallowed ground markers left. The vampire is going to be placed in the center of the ruins. Now, once I had everything set up, another thing I felt like doing was, rather than just sticking with this vampire in the center so the warband knows exactly what to expect, I thought maybe to make it a little bit more realistic and a little bit more challenging, I thought maybe we should randomize the vampire's location. So I'm going to replace the model with a blank marker and roll the directional dice to see where it starts the scenario. And then I think that in the monster phase, we'll roll the directional dice again and the vampire will appear 6 inches from that marker. And this will continue until the marker lands within the 12-inch maximum line of sight of a warband member. That might keep things interesting. Alright, so Ottilie and the warband have marched out into the woods. They've retraced their steps on the trail back to the ruined chapel. And Ottilie has deployed Claude ahead on a reconnaissance mission to see if he can note the locations of undead enemies. But she has expressly told him not to give himself away, so he should not press into the ruins themselves. Based on Claude's report when he returns to the rally point, where the warband waits for him, Ottilie has decided on a fairly simple attack plan, specifically coming from the east, as Claude has reported that revenants await generally west of the ruins. Ottilie orders the bulk of her soldiers to move as stealthily as possible for as long as possible, and Baptiste frowns at this. I'm no good at this sneaky nonsense. There might be a vague bit of nervousness in that comment as well. Ottilie nods at him. I know, which is why I'm not asking you to be quiet. You're to take the fight loud and clear to the closest revenant you can see, and you're to clear the unhallowed ground. Felice will accompany you and sow the salts. She looks from the infantryman to the vivandier. Felice checks the hilt of that silver dagger and nods. Baptiste grunts. Aye then. So, our troops line up on the eastern edge of the ruins, with Baptiste and Felice furthest to the south. Okay, the warband is in place. They expect from past experience the strange gloom that fills the ruins. There's a low mist coiling around the ancient tombstones, despite the day being sunny just a league to the east. Each soldier knows they've come to face the thing they fled from a fortnight ago. Sweat trickles down Gaspard's neck, and he rolls his shoulders. Vermont works the grip on his warhammer. Brielle tongues her teeth. The woods seem to darken with the tension, the smell of rot and decay cloying up from the ground. The leaves rattle softly in a dull breeze, sounding like bones. Claude whispers to himself, Today might be the day, my boy. Walking head on into something no man should. Aye, but she's going without a backward look, and if she goes, we go. He glances at Ottilie crouched down low in the bracken, her face still, her eyes sharp. He looks further down the line and sees Jolanda standing calmly with her staff, her expression as enigmatic as ever. He looks back at Ottilie and she's staring right at him. She raises the flat of her hand and makes a slow horizontal swipe. Claude nods, softly slings his musket, and moves forward. Turn 1 begins. Claude makes a stealth check with a 10 plus 5, and with that 15, he creeps up to the forest rock he plans to scale. Now, our stealth mechanics declare that a model only gets 4 inches of movement, regardless of whether they're successful or not, so this is where he stays at the base of the rock. Ottilie motions for Vermont and Brielle to follow her, and she creeps forward, rolling a 7 plus 7 for her stealth check. She moves between the trees and stones like a shadow, musket and silver bayonet cutting through the gloom. Vermont follows, widening his path a bit and rolling a 10 plus 5 for a 15 stealth check as he threads his way through the trees. Brielle sticks to her officer's back, rolling 8 plus 6 for another successful stealth check, whispering to Ottilie, "As soon as you see something, madam, you step aside. Let me do my job." Now the monster phase. The vampire remains out of line of sight, so we'll roll the directional dice and move its marker. The The Revenants move randomly because so far no one has failed to remain stealthy, so they are not aware of any intruders yet. The first, and we'll just call them by number going forward, stumbles westward toward the wall of the ruins. Revenant number 2 rotates in place in a drunken dancing mockery of life. Zombie number 3 lists and sways into the trees to the north. Baptiste watches his target stumble off into the gloom and curses under his breath. Not eager to lose sight of it, he rushes forward through the crumbling, overgrown cemetery. He spots the Revenant through the murk and snarls, "Oi!" and raises his musket and fires at it. With a 5+1 and a +1 for his accuracy and -1 for moving, and the shifting shadows and trees make the dim Revenant a difficult target to hit. Felice lights her torch and gains an extra 4 inches of movement from her successful sprint check. Charging through the cemetery on Baptiste's flank, she's determined to prove herself, and the silver knife gifted to her by her commanding officer bolsters her courage. Jolanda and Gaspard advance on Ottillie's flank, trying to remain stealthy as ordered, and both are successfully quiet, with an 18 and 15 respectively. The occultist's white robes shimmer softly in the gloom. Gaspard pulls on his plague mask. They both look southward at Baptiste's guttural curses and musket fire. Turn 2. Claude attempts to stealthily scale that rock to gain a tall vantage point, but he slips when a mossy surface gives way and lets loose a chunk of stone and debris, and the noise is surprisingly loud in the quiet gloom. The Revenants certainly hear it. "Good job, old man. Truly you are a professional," he mutters to himself, gaining the top of the rock and bringing that shiny new scope to his eye. Ottilie pushes silently onward, scouring the gray, sunless woods for monsters. She spots the Revenant Baptiste has baited, then notes a second Revenant through the ruined wall of the chapel, just on the edge of her vision. Crack! She steps on a fallen stick in the loam. She grits her teeth in a silent hiss. Brielle follows and remains stealthy with a 14, and Vermont creeps forward as well, hunkering down beside a tipped sarcophagus, remaining hidden with a second 14. Now the monster phase. We roll for the vampire, and yep, it's going to cross into line of sight. So in comes the figure that Claude, Brielle, Ottilie, and Vermont witness drifting through the walls of the chapel. Shining dark skin, the glint of fangs, and eyes burning with cold blue fire. Waves of hate and hunger wash over the soldiers, who collectively hiss in revulsion. Her stealth already broken, Ottilie calls out, "Jolanda, it's here in the ruins. Beware!" All of the Revenants stumble to a stop and turn towards the warband. The first zombie only has line of sight on Baptiste, and it heads towards the infantryman, starving. Felice tenses as she hears the shuffling steps approach from just beyond the trees. The second Revenant can't see anything to eat, but lumbers towards the closest noise, which was Baptiste's musket. Zombie number 3 moans and lurches through the woods towards Ottillie's voice. Vermont watches the crooked thing approach, peeking over the top of the broken sarcophagus. A small snake slithers over the cracked stone and Vermont shivers. Baptiste reloads, takes aim, and fires, and completely misses. He stares at his gun in disbelief. "What's going on here?" he snarls. Felice watches the zombie clear the trees. She screams and charges in with the silver knife and her torch blazing in the gloom. 9+8. Screaming, she hacks into it, blade flashing in the firelight, brutally knocking it to its knees, its head nearly cleaved from its shoulders from those 9 points of damage. The zombie claws at her legs, unstoppable even with 1 hit point left. But with a 5+1, it's a feeble attempt at best, and she boots it away. The doc's plague mask swivels to look at Jolanda. The ex-cardinated nun holds up her hand without looking at him. Gaspard reads the gesture correctly. Wait. Alright, the end of turn 2 means a Revenant exhumes itself from one of the unhallowed ground markers. And we're on to turn number 3. Ottillie's contingent of hunters can see the vampire. She shouts, guttural and full of conviction. Les Chasseurs de Cauchemars! Chasseurs les Cauchemars! Hunt the nightmare! Fill it with silver! Claude swings his aim onto the affront to nature, licks his lips, and fires at it. Double 0. Holy a 10+10. That, my friends, is what we call a critical hit. +2 for his accuracy, and that's 22. And the critical hit adds 2 to the damage, and the scout plugs the vampire right in the face, opening a third eye from which black tears leak, the cold memories of the lives it's taken. It trembles and bares its fangs with an inhuman hiss. Shaken, enraged, Claude has reduced it to 2 health with a single shot. The scout is already reloading. Ottilie raises her musket and finds the vampire through the intervening broken wall and whispers, "Back to the mud with you." Dude! What? Holy sh... You're gonna think I faked this roll. Dude, that's another 12 points of damage. Ottilie fires and her shot plows through the vampire's chest where its shriveled mockery of a heart lays, and it shrieks, a wailing, keening shard of sound that razors through the forest. The revenants tremble. Jolanda smiles softly in the shadows. The doc's plague mask twitches as he glances sharply over his shoulder. The vampire's visage crazes into a stone gray, cracks and fissures running through its skin like negative lightning, and its flesh turns into a silhouette of ash, which holds form briefly, then collapses into a sudden breeze as if the forest is sighing with relief. Dude, back-to-back critical hits? That's nuts. I would not believe it did I not have it recorded on camera, which I know is edited so you can't tell anyway, but I swear this is like legit, and we've never even rolled a critical hit in this game. Alright. Ottilie slings her musket without reloading and crosses into the ruins, drawing one of her pistols and the small golden icon beneath her trench coat. Brielle follows her and realizes they're surrounded by at least 3 zombies. The undead surround the ruins, she calls out. Fix bayonets, she yells as she shoulders her musket to fire at the newly risen revenant, but doesn't like her shot, and so she holds. Vermont looks from the disintegrating vampire to Ottilie and Brielle to the zombie lumbering towards him. Unsure of the best course of action, he charges the zombie, swinging out that warhammer and grunting. 2 + 8 + 2 for his melee gives him a 12, and his wild swing connects. But it's mostly a glancing blow as he tries to maneuver amongst the trees. He hits for 3 damage as the zombie plows into him, but it's mostly just flailing limbs thrown off kilter by the hammer's impact. And into the monster phase we go. Zombie number 1 tears at the intrepid Vivandier, but proves ineffectual with a 2 + 3, trying to hit her from its knocked down state. Felice easily battering back the lurching blows. She snarls and strikes back with a wicked backhand, silver blade flashing, finishing the severing it started. The zombie sways in place and collapses, headless, a pile of rotten meat. Back to the mud, she mutters, and wipes her face. Zombie number 2 leers towards Felice, smelling food not far from its grasp, and it moans with hunger. Revenant number 4 smells a veritable smorgasbord and doesn't know which direction to go. It all smells and sounds so good. It heads down the middle, following the wall of the ruins. Zombie number 3 snaps at Vermont, starving, rabid, and that 10 + 3 + 1 means it just manages to slip through the supernatural investigator's defensive posture. Oh, wait a minute. That fatigue token subtracts 1, and so it actually just misses. Vermont wildly counterattacks with a panic strength, and a 10 + 4 + 2 punches clean through the Revenant's chest. The hammer pounded 11 points of damage on top of the previous 3, explosively propelling the zombie backwards and returning it to the mud. Man, I want to shoot some of these scenes with a camera. He reaches up to touch his face, expecting rivers of blood, but his fingers only come away with dirt and sweat, and he breathes a small sigh of relief. Baptiste, shrugging off his confusion at his pair of misses, reloads his musket and charges past Felice toward the Revenant bearing down on him. Felice crosses to the grave dirt behind Baptiste and spends an action to sow consecrated salts into the desecrated ground, and the first unhallowed earth marker is down. 2 to go. Jolanda advances quietly until she can see the center of the ruins from the woods, and she softly tells Gaspard, "Onward, Doctor. Support our friends." She clasps her staff in both hands and tilts her head, slowly raising her eyes skyward. Gaspard punches through the woods, heading towards Ottilie, a hand on his pistol's grip. When he reaches the sarcophagus Vermont had used for cover, he sees zombie number 4 shambling along the wall, and instinctively jerks out the pistol and fires, but his hasty movement causes the shot to go wide, ricocheting off the wall with a 6 + 5 - 1 for moving. "Damn," he murmurs. And that's the end of turn 3, and another Revenant clambers its way up out of the desecrated ground. Turn 4. Ottilie prepares the icon and places it in the center of the ruins, and as she does so, a beam of sunlight breaks through the gloom and canopy of trees to fall upon it, as if the heavens have been waiting for this moment to reach down and acknowledge the woods. Ottilie studies this phenomenon while she reloads her musket. Brielle looks at a zombie on the other side of the wall, checks the far side of the ruins to her left, then charges the corrupt thing, vaulting the crumbling ruins and slamming into it with steel and laughter. "Come here, you son of a bitch!" And with a 1 + 9 + 1 for melee, she easily gouges the thing, but the zombie's flesh is just spongy rot, and the bayonet does little to stop his advance, with just 1 damage. It gurgles and chokes as it grapples with the grenadier, but with an 8 + 1 + 1, Brielle continues to laugh. "You ain't made him much, are ya?" Vermont shouts, "I'm coming, Grenadier," as he prepares to crash through the trees, blocking him from the zombie. But Brielle's savage reply stops him. "No! Consecrate the grave, you fool!" Slightly taken aback, Vermont realizes her battlefield wisdom and rushes to the upturned dirt and sows it with the salts from his belt pouch. Another unhallowed ground marker is removed. Baptiste lunges forward and guts the atrocity before him. At least, he tries to. The zombie reacts unlike the others. It jerks back out of reach before rushing back in, but it's clumsy and the infantryman bats it to the side, frustrated. "Merde!" Ottilie calls out. "Felice! The oil!" Felice looks at Baptiste tangling with the zombie. "Go!" he barks at her. She rushes into the ruins, vaulting the broken wall with a confidence that would make Brielle proud. We should have started the monster phase before Felice activated, but oh well, we're in the thick of things. So, zombie number 5 lurches towards Vermont, who is just barely the closest target. Zombie number 2 claws at Baptiste, and with a 7 + 4 + 1 for melee, but -1 for fatigue, its attacks are weak, and Baptiste strikes back with a snarl. He's had enough of missing. He flips the musket in the air, grabs the barrel, and swings the stock like a bat. 8 + 10 + 1 -1 for fatigue, and he clobbers it, knocking its jaw clean off for 8 damage, putting it 1 hit point from the mud. Zombie number 4 tries to bite the laughter off Brielle's face, but with an 8 + 2 + 1 -1, Brielle just laughs harder. She kicks it brutally in the chest, shoving it back, and its arms fly wide, and with an abrupt snarl, she stabs it straight through its throat. Gore and all but 1 of its hit points splattering the wall. Sweeping the gloom beyond the new shaft of sunlight, Claude spots a zombie through the ruins. It's a tricky shot. It's just on the edge of his vision, but lots of intervening terrain. But that scope boosts his confidence. "I see you there, friend. Welcome to the party." He fires, but doesn't even know where the shot lands. He reloads, chewing his lip. Gaspard reloads his pistol as he heads towards Ottilie and spots the newest revenant up ahead. Jolanda continues with her prayers, her bare feet flexing in the loam, centering her, feeling the forest floor. "Another shadow comes," she calls out in warning. Ottilie grits her teeth. That's the end of turn 4, and another revenant spawns in the remaining unhallowed ground, and a second vampire manifests on the board in the southeast corner, insatiably hungry. Turn number 5. Ottilie sees the revenant just outside the ruins and charges after it. "Felice, get that oil on the ground. Gaspard, with me." But with a 4 + 4 + 1, she is distracted by the new zombie erupting from the ground and falters in her attack. Her target turns the tables and strikes back with a 10 + 3 + 1 from melee, ripping through her coat and slamming into her ribs. She swears painfully, taking 10 damage, dropping to 3 hit points. That's a huge hit. Gaspard follows the officer, running right up behind her and firing point blank at the slavering horror, and somehow missing with a 5 + 1. In frustration, he jams the pistol into its holster and rummages in his bag for his syringe. Felice frantically douses the ruins in holy oil. When the last drop falls, she shatters the bottle against a wall and prepares to evacuate. "The holy oil is laid," she yells. Vermont hears Ottilie's pained cry, and when the smoke from Gaspard's shot clears, he sees the melee and without a thought charges the zombie trying to eat his officer. As he runs, he swings up the great warhammer and brings it down on the thing's head. 7 + 7 + 1, easily clocking it for 8 damage and crushing its skull. But still, it claws and rages. Monster phase. The vampire glides through the cemetery, sensing the warm, bright life beyond the ruins like a shark smelling blood in water. But wait, there's a closer beacon. Yes, a beacon of hope and bright future. It feels it must darken. It must consume. It turns to look at Claude on his rock. The newest zombie lurches toward Ottilie and crashes into her, moaning and biting, 6 + 5 + 1, just shy of being able to land an attack. Ottilie snarls and ducks, She almost counters on instinct, but Gaspar drags her by her collar back a step. Vermont's zombie thrashes blindly at him with a 5+8, and he fends it off before swinging that hammer again, but he stumbles and only succeeds in a glancing blow that causes no damage. Brielle's nearly done zombie scrabbles up the wall and sinks its teeth into her with a 7+10+1, chomping 7 points from the grenadier, who swears at her own blood splashing across the wall with the zombies. She strikes back in anger more than anything else and splatters the rest of the thing across the wall. She spits on the twitching remains and feels her ribs with a grimace. Baptiste's groaning friend goes in for a hug, blackened, rotten teeth smiling. 6+7+1 enough for that kiss to turn into a snarling snap of those teeth, tearing 6 hit points out of the infantryman. He strikes back, shoving the zombie and swatting away with a reverse-gripped musket, and we burn a fate pool die to give him the edge, and he smashes the thing for 7 damage, ending it. Heaving with hoarse breath, he takes a quick moment to survey his surroundings and spots the vampire behind him. His eyes light up seeing the ethereal monster. He looks down at his bag of silver shot. He grins humorlessly, flipping the musket back around and tucking it into his shoulder and firing. 6+10+1 for accuracy, and hits. His smile grows wider. About time, goddammit. The vampire takes 6 damage, turning to look at Baptiste, possibly in surprise. But it's hard to tell with all the anger twisting its features. Baptiste barks a laugh and reloads his musket. Claude sees Baptiste fire at something behind him, and he spins on his knee, tracking the scoped eye onto the vampire, and without blinking fires. Dude, nobody here is going to believe this. That bounced die is a 10, just like the one in the box. And that is insane. 3 crits in one game, and it's the only 3 crits we've ever rolled in Silver Bayonet. Evidently, Yolanda's prayers are working today. Dude, that's 12 damage on the vampire, and it shatters as another beam of sunlight pierces the gloaming veil, scintillating daylight smashing down through the canopy and onto the smoldering ash silhouette that breaks apart in the breeze. Baptiste looks sharply over at the scout on the rock. Claude tips his hat at the infantryman and reloads. Baptiste's smile sours just a tad and he spits, then turns back to the ruckus beyond the ruins. Brielle, wincing, sees the melee ahead of her, touches the holy symbol strapped to her chest, and charges past Vermont, bursting through the trees to slam into a zombie, shouting wordlessly. A 5+9, -1 for fatigue, and she guts the thing from sternum to neck, lifting it off its feet and sending it flying. Back to the goddamn mud, she screeches. Yolanda grips her staff, eyes skyward. Light the oil. That's the end of turn 5, and another zombie pushes up through the dirt. Turn 6. Felice races to the edge of the chapel ruins and dips her torch into the holy oil. Flames leap across the broken stones and erupt, filling the ruins with white fire. Bizarrely, in the middle of the conflagration, the idol stands untouched, sunlight still illuminating it amongst the holy fire. Vermont rushes to put himself between his injured officer and the groaning undead. He swings his hammer with a 5+7+2, and he smashes it for 6 damage with a satisfied grunt. It strikes back with a 7+3+1, and it misses as one of its knees gives out with a sour creak. The white flames have walled them off from the ruins now, and he yells, "Fall back, madam, we'll finish it." Ottilie responds with a wheeze, "We leave together, soldier." She raises a pistol, aiming at the zombie, but spasms with pain as she fires, her shot going down into the dirt between them. She squawks as Gaspar jabs her with the massive syringe, giving her 2 points of something energizing. "Apologies, madam." She glares at him, but grunts, "Thank you," through a clenched jaw. Monster phase. The wounded zombie gurgles and lunges at Vermont, reaching with scabbed arms, fetid breath on the investigator's face. 6+10, it latches onto Vermont's arm with inhuman strength and savaging him for 6 damage. Vermont curses, "Evil wretch!" and he strikes back. 5+7+1, sending it back to the mud with a snapped backhand swing of the warhammer. He spits on the foul carcass and Brielle barks a laugh. "That's the spirit, boy!" The new zombie stumbles into the investigator, snapping at him like a feral hound. 2+6+1 for melee is 9, and even with Vermont's 2 fatigue tokens lowering his defense stat from 14 to 12, the zombie misses. The determined investigator smacks away the thrashing limbs and goes into a huge crossbody swing, striking back with an... Okay, This is 9 plus 1 plus 2 for his melee, which is 12. But minus 2 for his fatigue makes it a 10. But he burns his monster expert fate pool die for a plus 2 to his melee attack roll, which brings him back to a 12, which hits, and he just reaches deep down and channels his fury and frustration into that swing. Causing 9 damage plus 1 for his heavy weapon, he annihilates that Revenant in a single hit, knocking it off its feet and into the wall of white flames, which almost seem to reach out in joy to cleanse the world of the aberration. What a total hero! His war cry echoes through the woods. Ottilie grunts, "Cleanse that ground," Brielle responds, "Aye, with pleasure, madam." She crosses to the desecrated grave and sows the salts, removing the final unhallowed ground marker. Jolanda finishes her ritual prayer, raises her staff, and looks to the flame-washed ruins. Claude looks from the flames to the occultist and blinks in confusion. Uncertain he's seen what he's seen, sunlight falls on her like a waterfall. Jolanda's staff seems to magnify the falling light, and then a storm of sunlight erupts from the staff, a deluge of brightness flooding the forest, the ruins, the cemetery, the scout himself who flinches from the brilliance. And then it's gone, subsiding like surf from a beach, leaving behind a soft glow, dappled sunlight on the forest floor. Claude lets out his pent breath, his tension and fear leaching from him. He pushes his sweat-soaked hat back from his forehead and sags against the rock, looking at the sky, through the softly moving branches, and finds himself at a loss for words. Total success. The warband has absolutely completed their mission. So that was a fun one. I can't get over all the critical hits. I mean, I was pretty terrified of the vampires, but because of the crits, no one had to tangle in hand-to-hand combat with them, which is really where the danger was. Again, it's just crazy that they took out 2 vampires, both with critical hits involved, and I thought just the one was going to take out at least 2 of the soldiers, like, to be perfectly honest. There were definitely some very cool cinematic scenes in this one. All right, we can go over the bonus experience points real quick. That's really all there is to do post-game on this one, since no one collapsed or didn't make it. We got a total of 9 bonus XP points because they did everything on the list. So, they even did more than that because they killed 2 vampires instead of 1. So everyone gets their +1 for the scenario, and everyone gets another from the bonus XP, and the MVP gets the last one, and that MVP is our supernatural investigator, Vermont. I think he took out at least 3 Revenants, he protected our officer, and he one-shotted the last one while holding 2 fatigue tokens. I mean, Claude rolled 2 crits and took out 2 vampires with both with help from another member. It's just story perfect since he just got that new scope, but still, that's help from the dice. Vermont really worked, Vermont was in the thick of it and really worked with fatigue and normal dice rolls, and I feel he deserves the win. Of course, it's the warband itself as a group that made the mission happen, so, we celebrate all of them, right? So this XP allocation puts half the warband at the first stat boost threshold. Ottilie, Vermont, Claude, and Brielle all gain a +1 to their courage stat. It's pretty sweet. Even though we've never had to roll a terror check yet, I think those are coming. Now the rest of them, assuming they don't perish in the next one, knock on wood, will hit that bonus after next game. I hope you guys enjoyed this one as much as I did. Go roll some crits. See ya.